So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Beyond COP28 Conversations with Youth, hosted by the Beyond COP team at UNHS Scotland. So, before I pass the floor on to Fatima, our moderator for today, I would just like to acknowledge the following people as key supporters and friends of the team. Without them, we would not have been able to welcome these amazing panelists. So, Dr. Gary Dunn, Dr. Dorothea Christiana, Dr. Tita Banks, Finn McArdle, Azadeh Subut, Professor David Anderson, Freddie Houpe, Taylor Benz Sakosa, and Professor Azin Hajiji. We would also like to welcome our panelists, who obviously you'll hear from shortly. And finally, a really big thank you and welcome to our interpreter, Armin Bepahanian. Armin will be interpreting between English and Farsi or Persian today. So please bear with us as we'll be taking brief pauses during the event to enable some brief translation. And without further ado, I'll now pass the floor on to our moderator for today's event, Fatima Iftikhar. So Fatima is a seasoned professional with extensive experience in the environmental sector and has played a pivotal role in spearheading initiatives aimed at fostering sustainability and environmental stewardship. She has been at the forefront of driving impactful change throughout innovative approaches and strategic leadership. She's also our very own chair of UNA Glasgow. So welcome, Fatima.
Thank you so much. I'll take over from here. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fatma, your host for today, and I'm thrilled to see so many passionate individuals gathered here to discuss the urgent issue of climate change. But before we dive into our discussion, I want to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists. Your expertise and insights are invaluable to our conversation today. Today's event is not just about talk, it's about action, it's about moving beyond the rhetoric of COP28 and finding tangible solutions to combat climate change. Because together we have the power to make the difference, and I'm excited to explore how we can do that together. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's break the ice with an activity. In the chat, I want each of you to introduce yourself in one word, and that comes to mind. And when you think about it, one word for future of our planet. The team will collate those responses and let's see what themes emerges. So go ahead, write down in the chat box. So while everyone is engaged in the chat box, allow me to share my experience of COP28 with all of you. Though I was there just for a first week, it was quite a ride. The action kicked off right from the day one with the launch of Loss and Damage Fund. It set the tone for what would be a roller coaster of events through the week for me. From intense discussion to last minute decision, there was never a dull moment in that conference. And the sheer scale of COP28 was awe-inspiring. The atmosphere was electric, filled with passion, ideas, and the sense of urgency I felt among my fellow members attending the conference. I found myself swept up in the energy of it all, and in meeting incredible people and forging connections left and right. I was constantly on the move in the conference, and I was breaking my step record every single day. Who knew a climate conference could be such a workout, right? But amidst all of that excitement, there was a sobering reality that echoed throughout the conference halls and the workshop sessions that climate change awaits for no one. It involves relentlessly outpacing our negotiation process. It became increasingly clear that our agreements are only as effective as their implementation. And we must translate our promises, our discussions into tangible actions and accelerate the solutions we so desperately need. Having been at COP27 in Egypt, I couldn't help but draw comparisons to COP28 in Dubai. The stark contrast highlighted the disparities in climate resilience between affluent and less affluent nations. It struck me that while the wealthier nations may have resources to mitigate the effects of climate change, less affluent nations are often left disproportionately vulnerable. So in summary, COP28 was an eye-opening experience that left me feeling hopeful, yet challenged. It showed me the power of international cooperation and the urgent need for action. So let's harness that collective will, push forward with resolve, and take decisive action to create a sustainable and thriving future for all of us. Because together we can make it happen. And as we move forward, it's crucial that we listen to the voices of our youth. They hold the key to shaping the future we need, and it's our responsibility to support them every step of the way. Now let's hear from our esteemed panelists. In a brief introduction, could each panelist please share who you are, what you do, and what the current climate crisis means to you in one word again. Let's start with Maria. I can see you. Sorry, you're first one on my screen.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Nordvall, and originally I come from the northern part of Sweden, which also is part of Sápmi, which is the Sami's traditional land that stretches over Norway, Finland, Sweden, and partly Russia. And I am Sami, indigenous, so I hope to be here and provide perspective from that sense. Currently, I'm in Aberdeen, University of Aberdeen, where I'm doing my PhD research. And if I have to pick a word, I'm actually going to go more for a phrase, which I think mirror the Sami values. And to me, it's that the lands are crying. Are we too deaf to listen? And I will hope to circle back to that quote again, because there is so much hope as well, which I hope we can take with us from today.
Thanks, Maria. Mohammed?
Thank you so much for having me here to these high-level roundtables. I think whereby everyone's tried here and been involved into the process of combating climate change. Personally, I come from the Republic of Guinea. It's based in West Africa. I have been living in Rwanda for 5 years for my studies. I graduated from Africa Leadership University, and I studied Global Challenges degree, which has been designed by Mavo Foundations. It's a conservation-based organization in Switzerland. So I am very, very interested into sustainability and also renewable energies as well. And I do believe that we can make our world better, whereby we can have a mutual respect and also partnerships. And I do believe that through that we can make our environment much more better, and also try to involve all the stakeholders into the process of decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh?
Hi everyone, thanks for the invite to speak here on the webinar. Originally, I am from Scotland, up in St Andrews, but I'm coming to you from Westminster, where I'm the Chief Energy Advisor to UK Parliament and the House of Lords. I'm also the leading skills and employment consultant to the International Energy Agency, so my time is split between London and Paris. And I also oversee energy governance for Youngo, which is the youth constituency to the United Nations. Currently, my overall understanding of the climate crisis, my involvement at COP28 was a bit different to most of global youth. I was sitting on the Energy Secretariat, so I was quite heavily involved with the legislation side of things and the outcomes and the negotiations. And the one thing that I have reflected on to date is what Maria actually reflected on earlier, was that the climate crisis to me is more an opportunity for hope and hope for intervention right now. And that was the one sort of key point that I sort of felt trailed through the entire discussions through it all.
Super. Irfan, would you like to introduce yourself?
عرفان میخوای چیزی اضافه کنی به اون جایی که خودت معرفی میکردی؟ چیز جدیدی اگه مثلا دوست داری بگو که چی شد که به علاقه من شدی به محیط زیست و مثلا چیزای خاصی تو محیط زیست هست که بهشون علاقه داری؟
خب ببینید واقعیتش اینه که ما در یک محیط فرودستی هستیم و این محیط فرودست همیشه قربانی سیاست‌های کلان محیط زیستی بوده. در نتیجه ما این وظیفه رو در وجود خودمون احساس کردیم که باید به نجات این محیط فرودست بریم، یعنی به کمک این محیط فرودست بریم و بتونیم که جلوی این همه تخریبات محیط زیستی رو بگیریم و در نهایت هم به اصطلاحی که میگن ما جهانی به مسئله نگاه میکنیم و همین امر باعث شد که من بیشتر به مسائل محیطی علاقه‌مند بشم. در واقع در زاکروز شما با هر کسی که در ارتباط باشی از بدو تولد یک گرایش خاصی داره. حالا این طرف میتونه گرایش سیاسی داشته باشه به یک جریانی، یک سری هم میتونن گرایش‌های خاص محیط زیستی داشته باشن. عموما در منطقه‌ای که ما زندگی میکنیم کار جمعی یک نوع ارزشه و همین ارزش گذاری کار جمعی باعث شده که مثلا ما هم بتونیم در این حوزه فعالیت کنیم.
Perfect. So Erfan told me that he's always been interested to be a voice for nature that he deems to be defenseless and voiceless, and he sees it as a duty to fight collectively against what is happening to nature. And this also adds to his earlier introduction that he's particularly interested in forest fires and preventing, extinguishing the fires that happen in the forest. And when I asked him if there was an event that could pinpoint his interest in climate change, he said no. It's just mostly just where I was born in Iran, called Zagros. People are like very much connected to the nature and where they're born, and they really value collective work. So that's what I said. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. I'll move on to Janet for the time being.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Janet Reddy. I am 19 years old, and I'm originally from Fiji in the South Pacific. Currently, I am in the States pursuing my undergraduate education at Cornell University. I'm studying environment and sustainability. I have been involved in the climate space for a couple of years now, maybe 4 or 5 years now. I started out with an international NGO spreading climate education to youth in Fiji, and that's kind of what started my journey. And it's opened me up to the injustices that are in this field, as well as the urgent need for change and how important youth voices are. So that brings me to the word that I would use to describe the current climate crisis would probably be survival. The Pacific has been at the forefront for the climate crisis for decades now, and we've been, living through natural disasters and having to deal with the ramifications of sea level rise, food insecurity, among so many other things. And I think adding on to that, not to be so dire, but as the previous speakers have echoed, there is still a lot of hope in this. And there's a saying that a group in the Pacific called the Pacific Climate Warriors like to say, and that's we are not drowning, we are fighting. And I think that's something that I hold very closely. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can I go to Suksavai now? Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Suksavai. I'm the founder of Zero Waste Laos. We are the first youth-led organizations working in Laos, and we work on climate action. So personally, I really love working with grassroots rebels. So we taking climate actions and try to do tree planting across the country, and also with school. So yeah, we work a lot with young students. Yeah, and also looking forward to hear more and inspire from you all. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, everyone. And let's now dive into the heart of our discussion with some questions. So I'll put the first question out there. What do you think is the most important development to strive for after COP28 for keeping the 1.5 degrees alive? Josh, would you like to take that forward?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really aware that I'm coming to this with quite a biased insight and overview, because my background is in energy, so clearly my all of my engagements at COP were primarily energy based, but the outcomes of it, we had some fantastic sort of agreements in place. We had the doubling of annual average energy efficiency by 2030 and the tripling of installed renewable capacity by 2030, because we have slowly come to recognize that energy plays a substantial part in sort of accelerating the rate of change and impact of climate change. But ultimately, when I was reflecting on this, a really substantial part of COP28 that sort of went under the radar was the launch of the Just Transition Work Programme, which seeks to bring into account sort of countries from advanced, developing and emerging economies, include them within dialogues, enable for sort of knowledge exchange and how best to deliver on a Just Transition Work Programme in their own countries, in their own space. So for me, to really see a tangible effect on how we can keep sort of this 1.5 alive alongside, these legislative acts that have come into place at COP, sort of it is ensuring that we follow through with sort of the commitments that we made. It's ensuring that people's places, lived experiences have that opportunity to be platformed, to have these spaces of inclusion, to actually talk through their own issues and reflect on sort of their learnings and their own lessons. So that's probably the most impactful way that we can actually ensure that we keep this goal alive, in my view, at least.
Thank you so much. And I think that just brings it back to my point in the start I made, that the promises and the targets that have been set, implementation need to take an action, and that's the way forward as per your suggestion, Josh, as well. Irfan, would you like to take a look at the question and share your views on it?
عرفان سوالشون اینه که فکر میکنید با ارزش‌ترین چیزی که به دست اومده از کاپ 28 برای اینکه بتونیم گرمایدما رو افزایش گرمایدما رو 1.5 درجه نگه داریم چیه؟ یعنی فکر می‌کنم که مهمترین چیزی که به دست اومده چیه از اون کاپ؟
در واقع یک سری مسائل هست اینجا که ما باید مطرح کنیم. اینه که همراه با رشد روزافزون سرمایه‌داری و پیشرفت بدون محال و لجام گسیخته تکنولوژی ابر انسان که خود را ضعوف فرض میکنه و در صدد سلطه بر طبیعت برآمده خود، اکنون این پرومپترهای زمان باید بر فرامین طبیعت حکم برانند و آن را برای منطق سود و قدرت در
Irfan. So Irfan wanted to, I think his take from the COP28 was that we should not be approaching the issue of climate change from this artificially constructed state-centric perspective. So for him, the most important thing is, like capitalism, which is at its core, like it's promoting unlimited consumerism and destruction of nature, and we should be focusing more on the collectives, on the masses, over just the state-centric policies, and which I will be expanding on this more throughout the meeting. Hope that gives a clear answer. But if there are any questions, let me know.
Right, thank you so much, and I'll try not to go into too much detail and discuss it now because we have got a discussion session later on, so we'll come back to that. Janet, would you like to share your views on the question?
Yeah, definitely. I think I just want to echo Josh's answer, and I think those are all great points. And I think there were some important steps taken at COP, but we speaking on behalf of the Pacific, we feel like it wasn't enough. Again, like I'm going to echo what I said earlier, we've been at the forefront of this crisis for decades now. It's not like a new thing that we've been facing for like the past 2-3 years. We've been facing sea level rise, relocation, families being affected because of natural disasters like cyclones. So I think we need to be aiming for something bigger so that we have more drastic, meaningful change even sooner. And so a lot of people at COP, a lot of climate activists were advocating for the complete phase out of fossil fuels. And while that does seem a little unrealistic, I think it's very important and something that needs to be explored. Again, it's something that's so big, and you have to think about the little steps that work towards this big goal. And I think we're heading in the right direction. But again, just the action, we need action to back that up. And we need to make sure that we're making steps in this direction as quick as possible because, the Pacific as a region is running out of time. We're tiny island nations that are facing sea level rise, we're like losing land. And I think in terms of not necessarily COP, but if you think about environmentalism as a whole in the past, there has been a lot of focus on individual action. So if you think about things like recycling, there's been so much emphasis on that for an individual to be like, okay, let me recycle, and then I've kind of done my part. But I think we need to go a step further and think about, in terms of like taking my recycling example, if you got 100 million people to recycle, that's only less than 10% that's actually being recycled from what goes in the bin. And that's just a disproportionate amount. I think if we, and that's not to say to stop recycling or anything, I think we just need to focus our efforts on different things. So if we, instead of, getting 100 million people to like start recycling, if we focus on the 100 top companies who are emitters of fossil fuels and hold constant public pressure through activism, I think that there is a potential for change. So I think it's just a matter of keeping the pressure and talking about it and continuing to talk about it and make sure it's not something that's swept under the rug to ensure that meaningful change happens. That'll be a good, important step that needs to be taken.
Thank you, Janik, for sharing your perspective on that. I'll move to my next question, that how can we better balance the gap between countries that have been heavily impacted by the effects of climate change and those currently less affected? Mohammed, would you like to answer that one?
Thank you so much. I think this question is very important towards the sustainability of our environment, and whereby everyone is also involved into the process. The decision-making process. And moving forward, I do believe that a comprehensive approach can be also involved, whereby all the stakeholders are involved into the process, which is very imperative to address this disparity between nations significantly impacted by climate change and those less affected as well. And when you look at the issues that I'm trying to highlight here, we are realizing that in some countries, most stakeholders, different stakeholders are not involved. And I do believe that the government, the non-governmental organizations, the business people, and also the local communities are supposed to work in hands towards, the sustainability of environment. And it's very crucial to acknowledge these distinct vulnerabilities and difficulties faced by heavily impacted countries, which often suffer from more frequent and severe natural disasters, such as droughts and deforestations. I'm going to contextualize these perspectives in my own country, the Republic of Guinea. We are facing a lot of rudimentary or traditional agricultural practices, for instance. And we are the water tower of West Africa, and most sub-regions countries take their sources from Guinea. And Guinea has 13 million hectares of arable lands. As a matter of fact, we are left behind into the sustainability aspect. And 68% of the agricultural practices are very rudimentary and traditional. And to address these issues is very simple. In my own understandings, in my own perspectives, I do believe that we can promote sustainable development practices, which can also help the vulnerable countries build resilience to climate change. This can also include investing in renewable energy sources as well, promoting sustainable agriculture in most African countries, whereby we have a huge amount of arable lands, and implementing measures to protect ecosystems and biodiversity. This to be said, in my own perspectives, to make it very clear, if we really want to make this into actions and try to get out of the concept of ideations process, is to get on board different stakeholders, looking at the bottom lines and having different perspectives, which can make an approach more critical, more inclusive, whereby everyone is involved into the process in order to combat, these issues that are killing more than cancer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing your perspective on that. Josh, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things in my own background experience, is very stark and very different to the other panelists here, but I'm doing an awful lot of work on what we call people-centered transition. So it's how we humanize and sort of we move just beyond jobs and skills, or we move just beyond, gender balance and equality. It's how we strive to ensure that everyone is included sort of in these discussions and dialogues. But I mean, truthfully, I think the platforming and spaces of inclusion, again, it always seems to come back to this, but it's ensuring that we are able to elevate and have young people in these sort of real formal sort of stark positions of policy making, policy change, policy impact. It's ensuring that the young, the youthful and reflective mindsets have these opportunities to feed into political processes to actually have a meaningful impact, because again, this COP is, as I'm sure we all know, it's the largest COP that we've ever had. It was over 16,000 private jets. It was double the size of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh the previous year. It was a record number of young people that were there, and yet time and time again they were excluded from decision-making processes, or in instances where they were included, sort of their badge or their recognition wasn't as a young person, sort of who's able to reflect on their own experiences. They were just grouped under the umbrella of their party or their organization that they were there. So there was no real formal recognition or opportunity for young people to sort of fully intervene and sort of mark their stamp on it. And of course, there's fantastic organizations that we work with, and I've been associated to like SCG7 Youth Constituency or Student Energy or Young Go Bricks Youth, sort of whatnot. There's a lot of these sort of grassroots youth organizations out there that we always campaign and we always call for sort of more inclusive spaces, greater financing, greater opportunities. Sort of we strive to share these benefits with young members within our wider constituency. But again, it's really been quite difficult sort of without sort of these spaces and these platforms to really visualize and say this is what we need. And it's really it's incredible just how quick that the impact that young people can have in these decisions is quickly forgotten and can just be youth washed and just ignored sort of and overtaken by the overall party line itself. So for me, I'd say that's probably one of the key points that I picked up.
Right, thanks, Josh. And I think the inclusivity is one theme that's coming across from the panelists. We can discuss that later. I'll quickly move on to Janet, if you would like to share your opinion on this theme.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's important to first recognize that we're kind of all in this together globally as a whole. So it's important that we're taking steps and making space to help those who are affected more in terms of countries. So, for example, if you look at the South Pacific as a region, Fiji, it has in the past has opened our shores to people from other Pacific island neighboring countries like Kiribati to let them come and stay here because of sea level rise, and their homes are being, going underwater, so they don't have a place to live. And I think that kind of gesture needs to be echoed on a more larger scale. And what I mean by that is, I think that there needs to be accountability globally. It's important to recognize and keep in mind that in the past, I think now we're kind of getting to a global average, but in the past, the countries who were the biggest emitters of fossil fuel or who had the biggest emissions weren't the ones who were facing the most impacts of climate change, and it was these smaller island nations in the past who were disproportionately facing greater impacts when comparatively they were contributing maybe just a drop in a bucket to these emissions and what was driving the climate crisis growing. So I think there needs to be accountability in terms of making space for adaptation for countries, as well as ensuring that we're taking steps to cleaner sources of energy and away from the climate crisis, because I think you need to recognize both sides of it, because you can't continue in your current track and be like, okay, we'll be doing all the same things as long as we're providing adaptation. I think these two things go hand in hand, and we need to make sure that we're kind of balancing both sides of the spectrum.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Janet. I'm keeping a tab on the time as well, so I'll quickly move on to the question number 3 and we can discuss later on. So my question would be, how do we ensure that climate change solutions are intersectional so that marginalized individuals and societies are included in the climate discussion? Maria, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I think me being here at this event as a Sami person in itself is an opportunity and a strategy to make indigenous and marginalized voices heard and included in the climate discussions, which of course should be the norm, and to always strive after diversity of perspectives in a question that affects all of us. But I want to talk a bit about the strategies from a different perspective as a person living in the Arctic, and a tendency that climate discussions are often proposed to be and described as the green, but we as Sami people often experience them as a green colonialism that often violate human rights and are destroying the natural way of life for our reindeers. And I think this is very important to take into account when we are trying to find strategies, because the definition of green colonialism in Sweden is exploitation of land and natural resources to promote sustainability objectives elsewhere. So many of us experience this as just a label to legitimately colonize our land and water. And I think that this is something we need to talk a lot more about within this context, who are paying the price for strategies that aren't good for everyone. And I can also quickly mention that just to listen to how Indigenous people live their life and getting an understanding of it is also a way to include us in these conversations. And I've been taught to never leave footprints after myself when I'm out in the nature and in the forest. Never take more than what you need, and always say thanks, and keep this circle of life really. And that circles back to my quote or my phrase in the beginning, that the lands are crying. That is just to emphasize the urgency, because we see it every day in the Arctic, how the climate changes are affecting us. And that phrase shows our way of viewing that everything has a soul. And I think we need to include this thought pattern in the climate discussions, which I see as tendency to always come from a Western perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your opinion. I would move to Suksavai. Would you like to add anything to this question?
Yes. So yeah, thank you for the question. Maybe I can say something is also related to my experience. You know, in the past few years, I used to apply to join the size event of COP, but I did not get selected at that time. So then I thought that, okay, if I cannot join, and that's the first time that I think, why I'm not organized something here in my country. So that's the first time that we start to organize youth climate action in Laos in 2021. So and until now, we have so many young people joining us across the country and more than 11 provinces, and I think we reach out more than 550 schools to engage with climate action. So for me, I always love to work at the grassroots level and the community level. So I prefer to do the action. So I think the most important about to ensure the all stakeholders to join this is also we have to make sure that the awareness, the message is there. For example, starts from the grassroots level, and then now we also influence to the policy levels. But more importantly, we also being probably we could be one of the first of youth rights organization that takes big actions in the regions of the Southeast Asia as well. So I would like to emphasize that no matter what the policy is there, the strategy is there, but at the end it's about the actions. So I believe that everyone here, we very passionate, we want to take action and we want to make the sense, but we have to also be aware and understand the context of the each country or even the policy, so that we are not ruins our energy or disappointed. So we have to also maintain our energy, our passionate to be there. Otherwise, if we put too much effort, then it's nothing happen. And then at the end, all the energy that we want to do is will just waste. So yeah, that's what I want to share, that we have to understand the context, even we want to do a lot, but also to try to identify where the labor exploit that we can make the change. For example, here in Laos, our political system is my different from Western, from Middle East, but the grassroots level that we never know that it can be the very big change and really can empower to the policy levels that we are accepted and be heard. And I'm sure that in the few years onwards, we will do a bigger sense. For example, we start to do the nurseries house. So that means we work a lot with the grassroots level and then with the community levels, and we also try to engage with the private sector. So I think all stakeholders have to understand the strength and what they can do, not just only what we want to do, and we push a lot of our effort, but at the end, it's nothing happened. So that's, I think it's very important to understand what we can do, and yeah, do that part at the very best. Yes, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Suk, for sharing your views on that question. Mohammed, would you like to add anything to this?
Thank you so much, Fatma. I do believe that there are some of the factors that we can also consider to make the climate change solutions more intersectional. First of all, having inclusive decision making, what I said previously, is very important, because I'm going to contextualize this into the Guinean realities. We have a lot of ethnic groups in Guinea, and we have realized that if the government tried to engage, most of the ethnic groups into the process from the bottom line, I do believe that the development of the climate adaptation strategies can also be addressed into their specific needs and challenges, because you cannot just go over there to the indigenous, people and coming up with some solutions, which are not even contextualized into their realities. So you have to know their needs and their interests into coming up with some ideas or some perspectives to address their problems. And the second thing is the equitable resource allocations. We realize that most in Guinea, most people or indigenous people are left behind into the decision-making process. So in terms of economic functions as well, and also the social aspect. So making people ensure that the funds that are going to be allocated for them are very inclusive, and they're not going to use that money to eat and everything, but to create some initiative, social impact into their society, whereby some young people can also be involved into the process and make impact in their community. You should call, for instance, grassroots leaderships, because I do believe in that small actions, breeds big actions. And when we start doing small action, that will create impact. The most important here is how we can create impact, how small it is, but just create impact in your own community, as my previous colleague said. And the third options is the promotions of social justice. And climate change solutions should address underlying social justice issues such as poverty and inequality, mostly in African countries, and just looking at the vulnerability of the marginalized communities. In Guinea, for instance, policies that promote economic empowerment and access to essential services can also help them improve the resilience of the communities facing climate change. Because at the end of the day, those are the people who are the rural areas and practicing agriculture. And if there's no promotion of social justice, they will not be able to accelerate their activities. And if they don't accelerate their activities, that will affect to the national economy. So it's very important to look at those aspects in order to drive our society on all factors or all index of development. The most important here is the educations and also the partnerships part. We have to let people aware about the impact that we are doing. We have to inspire people. So how can we inspire people? Is to let them know about the problems or the future of that effects that will provoke into their communities. I think mentioning all of that, creating all the possible initiatives that can involve people into the process can be very important and make the climate change solutions more intersectional to drive our environment much more better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing your thoughts on the topic here. Irfan, would you like to add something?
Yes, I will be speaking on behalf of Irfan. I already have the transcript of his answer, so this is basically Irfan speaking. So I'll just read through Irfan's answer. It says, a massive ecocide is happening in the Middle East. The nation states of the Middle East, especially Turkey and Iran, are activating the destructive machines of development and destruction. This is more and more witnessed in the universal competition for gaining more profit and power. The GAP and the DAP projects in Turkey have choked the life out of marshes, Tigris, and Euphrates rivers, and as well as underground water reserves. Lisu Dam has destroyed thousands of years civilizations of Hassan Cave, the destruction of Lake Urumia, and annual deforestations of thousands of acres of Zagros Forest, which is where Irfan is from, and northern Iran forests are products of planned policies and deliberate interventions of power structure in Iran. Extensive dam constructions on water basins have resulted in destruction of local communities and forced migration of people to the outskirts of cities. In these circumstances, transitioning to a green society and green energy is nothing more than a joke. In the Middle East, we face a destructive apparatus that swallows everything. Fighting against that needs a public mobilization. In recent years, especially in the Middle Eastern countries, the relationship between government and public institutions and environmental activists has been hostile. the ruling structure considers any environmental action as opposition to itself and jails the activists on security charges. Hence, it is necessary for relevant international institutions to directly connect with civil institutions, as in the public and the masses, and environmental activists, so that perhaps these public institutions and activists could carry out successful programs. This also could expedite international cooperation among societies. According to Mr. Guterres, peace is the last hope of the global society. We believe that the world needs a stable, peaceful existence to prevent climate collapse. So it's better to spend military budgets and arms that are for instigating wars and for world leaders to showcase their power and prestige to a better world and environment. We need a fundamental change based on ecological concepts that would not only bring green energy, but also a green and democratic society for us. This will not be realized until relations of profit and power change fundamentally. So this is Arfan's speech. I hope that was clear for everyone.
Well, that was. Thank you so much for that. May I please invite Tanmay Nag to speak about his organization. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi. So I'm Tanmay, and I'm from India, where we are currently building somewhat like a Google Maps for environmental action. The question we are really trying to solve is environmental projects or initiative do you know are running near you? Whereas, we often have the visibility of how many restaurants are running near us. So we are building that digital infrastructure. One thing that, in my experience, that I've seen the youth to constantly say, and the constantly capacity that they need is, it's a very simple thing, but honesty. We as youth, we look forward to our leaders and our corporations and the CEOs of today or the politicians of today. And we say that, when it comes to climate crisis, number one is, of course, acknowledgement and acknowledging it with 100% honesty. Then it comes to developing solutions. And then when you're developing solutions and acting on it, then let's go ahead without any greenwashing or any false commitments or passing the ball to the future generation. What we need to do is act now. And today, in this generation, we have the largest youth generation in the history of the world. So the youth really understands these challenges, and we all are facing these challenges around climate change. And we need honesty and trust, and then we need to build the capacity of the youth to actually take actions on the grassroots.
Okay, so I think I would wrap the discussion here. And as our discussion draws to close, I want to express my utmost gratitude to everyone who contributed and came today. Your passion and commitment to fighting climate change are truly inspiring. And let the energy and ideas generated from today's event and turn them into meaningful action as well. I would also like to express my thanks to our panelists, participants, and organizers for making today's event a success. Together, we can create a more sustainable and resilient future for generations to come. I will now pass on to the Beyond COP team to say a few words before we close. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Fatima. And thank you as well for your wonderful moderation. You guided us beautifully through the event, so thank you. I'd also like to say on behalf of the Beyond COP team at UN House, we would like to express our own thanks to the panelists, Mohammed, Josh, Janet, Irfan, Suk Savoy, and Maria. I recognize that many of you are in weird time zones. I know that Janet, it's 5 a.m. for you, and Suk Savoy, and Mohammed, and Irfan, it's quite late for you in the evening. So thank you so much for waking up early, for staying up to join us. A huge thank you as well to Armin, our interpreter. I know how hard it is, well, I understand how hard it is to interpret between two languages, and you really navigated that really well. So thank you so much. And also to everyone here, the audience, for your wonderful contributions to the wider climate conversation. Thank you so much, Tanmay, for sharing your experiences with Envive, and thank you, Barry, Alison, Gillian, for your contributions as well. Many of you have dedicated your lives to fighting for the climate and for our life on Earth, and on behalf of everyone on the planet, we thank you. And while there is still so much to do to save our planet, we should also take some time to acknowledge our efforts so far. The fact that all of us are here today, as Maria said, is a testament to how far we have come, even though we have so much left to do. So I'd like to invite you all to give a round of applause, please, for our panelists and for you yourselves. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for the round of applause for all the speakers and the helpers. But yeah, so I think many of you are probably thinking, like, what's next? How do we translate everything that we've talked about into action? So following on from this event, we're going to be collating all of the responses in a report and considering the action points. And this will be distributed widely. So, you know, if anyone wants a direct link, just let us know through the email that I posted in the chat. But yeah, and those actions that we can implement, we promise to do. And those that might be a bit more long-term or abstract, we will continue to brainstorm and hopefully it will work out. But yeah, so please keep an eye out on the UNHS website and social media for some exciting announcements coming in the next few weeks. And thank you again for attending Beyond COP28 Conversations with Youth. And I hope you have a really good morning or an afternoon or a night.